Good. Welcome. Thanks for coming. And tonight I'm going to be talking about Sermorelin. So a little show of hands. How many people in here even know what Sermorelin is? I'm just kind of curious. It's brand new out. Okay. So we'll I'll talk a little bit about when it was first developed and why nobody's ever heard of it. And then we'll get into the part that I really like, which is about how we can not only live longer, but live better and have less disease. I think Sermorelin is a real key to that. And that's going to be the basic theme of this message. So, see, it says Sermorelin, the new fountain of youth, question mark. Okay. This is one of my favorite quotes by an author from San Francisco by the name of Theodore Sturgeon. He put this in one of his books about 30 years ago. 90% of everything is crap. I think he's being overly optimistic. But so what I'm hoping to do in this lecture is kind of convince you that this falls in the 10%. That isn't crap. This is some real good stuff. It's real legitimate. It's been around for a long time. It's got some solid science behind it, and it can really make a big difference. Okay, most of you know, because I know most of you, so I know that you know, that anti-aging medicine is for real. It actually does work. But you know, for those of you that haven't heard this, and maybe for the listeners in the TV audience, just let me be clear on what we mean by anti-aging medicine. What happens as we get older is that things don't work so well in the body. From a physiological perspective, physiology meaning how the organs in the body work, they don't work as well. Your heart doesn't work as well. Your kidneys, your liver, etc. don't work as well. And then there's a whole other issue which you could call your biochemistry. A plus B goes to C, your basic biochemistry thing. For a lot of reasons, that doesn't work so well. So your body's ability to regulate itself, because it doesn't have the physiology it had before, and it doesn't have the biochemistry it had before, is diminished. And when it can't regulate itself, it starts breaking down. As you might know, the body breaks itself down and then builds itself back up every 24-hour period. Well, the building itself back up part is the part I'm talking about. It seems like the breaking itself down part works just fine. But the building itself up, called the anabolic part, because of this decrease in our physiology and decrease in our biochemical efficiency, it doesn't work so well. So we don't build up, and over time the body basically breaks down. What we're talking about with anti-aging medicine is not really a fountain of youth. We're not talking about turning back the hands of time in the way that people are on anti-aging programs typically don't look any different 6 months after they're on the program than they do. Well, they will have lost weight, they'll have gained some more muscle, but you know, overall appearance still got wrinkles. Everything still shows up. We still know that you know, you're of age. But the thing that's happened with an anti-aging program is we've made the biochemistry more youthful. Now, how do we know we did that? Because we can measure the biochemistry. And we can see just blatantly it's more like it used to be. A good example of that would be cholesterol. As we all get older, one of the things that happens to the majority of us is the cholesterol starts to steadily go up. That's an example of a biochemical marker. Another biochemical marker would be your insulin levels. Your insulin levels tend to go up. Another one, your blood sugar levels tend to go up as you get older. So these are blood pressure. That's a physiological marker. So we have these markers, and what we'll do is change your biochemistry so it's more youthful. And how do we know it worked? Because we see the markers go down. Your markers become more youthful. So in essence, that's what we do. Anti-aging medicine's for real. We use an individualized program based upon the following 4 therapy interventions, which gives you a more youthful biochemistry and a more youthful physiology. And these are the 4 things that it really comes down to. We've got exercise, which is basically at the top of the heap. If you had to do only one thing to increase the quality and length of your life, you would exercise. Thing number 2 would be diet. And we'll talk a little bit about diet tonight, because as it turns out, diet does influence how Sermorelin works. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But the gist with diet is to eat good, whole, healthy, nutritious foods. Don't overeat. That's a big thing. Almost everybody overeats. It's real easy to overeat. And then watch the quality, the carbohydrate content to your foods. So by exercising regularly and doing those kinds of things with your diet, you can improve and make more youthful your physiology and your biochemistry. The 3rd thing is what we're going to talk about is supplements and hormones. Sermorelin is a hormone. So we'll talk particularly about this. And yes, it's important for everybody to understand. I was talking, to a patient today, and it's so typical. And the question is always, geez, you've got me taking 20 different supplements. How long am I going to have to do this? How long does this go on? This doesn't seem natural. And the truth is, it's not natural. It's completely not natural to be taking 20 different supplements every day. What is natural is to maintain an old physiology and an old biochemistry. What is unnatural is to take an old guy and maintain a youthful biochemistry. So that's not a natural phenomenon. Anti-aging medicine is not a natural phenomenon. It's somewhere we're kind of trying to buck Mother Nature a little bit. And in the process of doing that, you do have to take stuff. So when you were young, in order to slow down the aging process, you didn't have to do any of this. You didn't have to exercise. You really didn't have to watch your diet all that much. You certainly didn't have to take supplements. You definitely didn't have to take hormones. You didn't have to do any of this stuff. But as we get older, if you want to maintain that kind of quality life that we're talking about, you have to do stuff. And one of the things you have to do is take handfuls of stuff. Now, that's different from person to person. I'm not the kind of person that believes in everybody getting a big old bag of stuff and everybody gets the same stuff. What I realize is that some of us are just so genetically blessed, we only need this much stuff. And then the other people on the other side of the bell-shaped curve, they need that much stuff, and the rest of us are kind of in between. So it's a very individualized program. So we want to individualize. When we talk about Sermorelin tonight, I'll talk to you about how we individualize whether you need it, because you might not need it, and if you do need it, what kind of dose you need, and so forth. So we got exercise, we got diet, we got supplements and hormones, and the last is stress management. This is maybe my favorite one, because this is one we all suffer from, including yours truly. There's no way you can get away from this. Maybe if you join a monastery someplace in the high Himalayan mountains and live that kind of meditated all day long, perhaps you could get your stress levels down. But when I'm talking about stress now, I'm not just talking about the mental and emotional stress that we all get, okay? I'm talking about all the impact, stressful impact on your body, most of which I look at as energetic and physical. So let me kind of break that down a little bit. Stress is basically the too muches and the not enoughs, okay? The too muches being all that stuff we have in our lifestyle that's just too much. We eat too much. We have too much sugar. We have too much coffee. We have too much alcohol. So believe it or not, there are people who exercise too much. So there's too much electromagnetic radiation. Cell phone towers in this area, we used to have 3 or 4 of them 2 years ago. We have now 500 in this area. The amount of electromagnetic radiation is logarithmically escalating. This is stuff we don't see, so you don't stop and think about it. But you're getting bombarded by electromagnetic radiation of all kinds. We've got 24-hour wireless internets. We've got the wireless phones in the house. Big bad news, by the way. And all just the electromagnetic stuff. That's stressful. That's a too much thing. Then on the other hand, you've got too much environmental toxins, too many heavy metals. We know that we all have 200 times the amount of lead in our bones now than they did 100 years ago. Now that's got to have some effect. Now for some of us who are just genetically super blessed, it'll have less of an effect than on those of us who aren't blessed in that way. But it's going to pay its toll. So this is all the too muches. So as I'm talking about this, you can start to think, well, how do you get away from that? The answer is, you don't. You try and limit its effect on your body by taking things. You can't get away from the cell phone. You don't even have to own a cell phone. You're going to get zapped with the electromagnetic radiation from somebody else's cell phone. So, so those are the too muches, the not enoughs, or mostly not enough sleep, not enough vitamins, not enough of the things not enough hormones, not enough stuff it takes us to restore ourselves. So stress is actually a thing that we all battle with. You can't really escape it, but what you can do is you can take certain herbs and nutrients that will strengthen your body against it. All of these things work together. Yes, you can do any one of them and get some benefit. But if you really want to get the whole holistic effect of these four things, you do all four. And tonight, of course, we'll just talk about the one on Sermorelin. So let's get right into it. Okay. IGF-1 stands for insulin growth factor 1. Insulin growth factor 1. That's the name of a hormone. Now it has another name called somatomedin-C. So you can go into the lab and have that blood test done. They'll tell you what your IGF-1 level is and or your somatomedin-C level. That is in essence growth hormone. So IGF-1 and quality of life. So this is all about growth hormone. So when I say the word growth hormone, I'm interchangeably meaning IGF-1, which is a measurable thing in your bloodstream. So I can tell you right now what your IGF-1 level was. Now, healthy IGF-1 level is in the order of excess of 200 milligrams per liter. When I measured mine, I'm 61 now, when I measured mine at 10, 11 years ago, it was 48. It's pretty pathetic. I mean, the low end of the range for a 60-year-older is something like 75. So I was 54, and I was almost half of the low end of the range on that. Now, why is that? It wasn't because my lifestyle was really bad. I was doing a lot of good things. It's just, that's the way it is. Some of us just are not genetically blessed to be making a lot of IGF-1. And so you can go have your level checked. For most people, in, say, their 50s, for example, the level's going to be in, say, the low hundreds, 130, 140. Again, you want to be somewhere between 200 and 250. So you check your level. If it's between 200 and 250, there are going to be some people like that. Fine, don't need it. Your body's already cranking out enough. But to the degree that it's lower than that, that's kind of what we're talking about. Thierry Herzog, which is one of the medical doctors that over the last decade or so has done a lot of research, and especially clinical research. Clinical meaning he's an actual doctor with real patients, seeing real patients, seeing how it works with real people, versus some guy off with a test tube someplace in a lab never sees a human being. So you can take a clinical researcher's word knowing that he has seen patients, and it means that. So that's Thierry Herzog. He's done a number of studies. This was something that he presented at the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine in December of 2005. What he did was he reviewed all the published studies on IGF-1 from 1974 all the way up until 2002. Every single study was published. He had hundreds of them. And here's what he found out. When he looked at IGF treatment, so these are treatments which raise IGF-1 levels. We'll talk to you about what those look like. When he looked at those, he looked at all the studies. He found that 88% of the studies showed a beneficial effect of raising IGF-1. This was using growth hormone, injections of growth hormone to raise IGF-1. 88% of the studies showed benefit. 12% of the studies they couldn't find any improvement at all. But what's significant to notice is in terms of adverse effects, there wasn't one adverse effect reported in the entire literature between 1974 and 2002. Now, I mention this particularly because medical boards around the country and so-called experts in hormones and such have you know, you hear them on daytime talk radio and daytime talk TV, etc., talking about the dangers of growth hormone. I will talk a little bit about side effects and some of the potential issues of growth hormone. But when it's properly administered, when you properly do what it takes to get your IGF-1 levels up, that's the kind of adverse reactions you can expect, basically zero. Okay, then he looked at, but that's not always enough. You know, doctors, you know, and very discriminating scientists and clinicians, you know, they don't care about just any old study. They want to give me a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. You know, well, this is what science is supposed to be all about. Okay, so he looked at just those double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. This is the best sort of clinical study that any researcher can do on the use of growth hormone to raise IGF-1 levels. There weren't that many. I think there were a total of 7 studies. You find 5 of the 7, or 71%, showed benefit from it. 2 of them showed no noticeable improvement, or 30%. And again, this is real important. In terms of adverse effect, there wasn't one adverse effect reported. And in fact, in every single clinical study that's been done, where the dosage was monitored properly, that's key. You know, they have done studies where they gave, you know, 70-year-old men just superhuman doses of growth hormone to see what would happen, and yes, there were adverse effects reported there. But we're talking not superhuman doses. We're talking about the dose it takes to take Frank Shallenberger at an IGF-1 of 48 and pop him up to 200, not to pop him up to 890 so he's Superman flying around town. If you do it properly, there are no adverse effects from this. So IGF-1 in your body, you might say, okay, so now we're pumping up. What's it going to do? Quality of life was better. Everything looks pretty good. Okay, what's it do? There are basically 4 areas that that IGF-1 is going to have its effect in your body. Probably the most important is in the production of collagen. Collagen is that substance that cells manufacture, and there's certain cells that just crank collagen out, that holds us together. It's in essence the substance that holds us together. If you think of yourself as being you know, cells all held together, which is what we are, and think of that a little bit as a brick wall, collagen would be the cement holding all the cells together. And we have collagen, especially in your connective tissues like your skin, your muscles, your bone, your cartilage. That's all made out of collagen. 100% of collagen is created upon the stimulation of IGF-1. So as your IGF-1 levels go down, your collagen level will go down. As your collagen levels go down, you start falling apart. You start losing that cement between your cells. Now, is this something you're going to notice overnight? You're going to like wake up the next morning and say, oh my goodness, I've lost about 5% of my collagen last night. It was bad. No. But you will notice this over a 5 or 10 year period. You know, you see a picture of yourself and you say, is that me? I've changed. You know, I've got wrinkles. My skin isn't quite the same. I can see it just doesn't have the same quality here. If you get a bone density test, you see my bone density's down a little bit. You know, things start to sag. Okay, so we get sagging in certain areas of the body. Very classical. There's nothing you can do about it. Sooner or later, that's going to get you. But we're talking about the rate at which this will happen. So that if somebody is maintaining, up until, say, the age of 90 or 100, is maintaining an IGF-1 level of 220, they're going to hold up a lot better than somebody like I would have been, who from the age of 53 had an IGF-1 of 43 and going down, because they wouldn't have the collagen to hold themselves together. So that's probably the most important aspect of all of IGF-1, is it builds up the collagen, cartilage, skin, bone, muscles, all that stuff that we're made out of. Keep in mind also that your liver, your kidneys, your intestines, the digestive glands, the immune system is all based around collagen as well. So the way your physiology functions is also affected by this. This is a huge thing. The second thing that it does is it has to do with the heart. Muscles is one action that IGF-1 has a lot of effect on, and the heart's a muscle. It's very simple. So what's one of the main things that happen to people as they get older, especially as they start hitting that 8th and 9th decade? They go into heart failure. Their heart just won't pump very well. To a large extent, that's completely reversible with IGF-1 and certainly preventable by taking IGF-1. It'll keep your heart strong as well as it will with the rest of the muscles. So we've got just general buildup and maintenance of collagen. We've got keeping the heart strong so it doesn't go into heart failure and it pumps out well. Think about that for a second. If your heart's not pumping well, what does the pumping action do? It gets stuff to your cells, right? You know, all that food you eat, all the vitamins and minerals that are in there. How's that stuff going to get to the cells? Heart's going to pump it there. The very oxygen that you need so much for the cells to do anything, how's the oxygen going to get there? Heart's going to pump it there. So the hormones, like Sermorelin, how are they going to get to the cell? Heart's going to pump it there. So even though we think, and doctors tend to think of, you know, heart failure as being a clinical condition where patients can't breathe and they get put in the hospital and we've got to put them on diuretics and such. I want you to start thinking in terms of more subtle issues of heart failure, where the heart's not in gross failure, you're not in the hospital, but oh, by the way, it doesn't pump quite as well as it used to, meaning every single cell in your body is getting affected by that. The third part would be that it increases the metabolism of fat in all the cells of the body. So one of the nasty little things that happens to us as we get older is that our bodies don't burn fat so well. Now, your cells can survive by doing one of two things. They can either burn fat to survive, or they can burn sugar to survive. They get their choice. Mother Nature gave us a choice. The way it's supposed to work in a good, healthy individual is we burn fat really efficiently and well. That's why the body can store a lot of fat. It's our principal fuel. But what happens as time goes by is we don't burn fat so well. So then the cell goes into its emergency mode, because we do have an emergency mode, and that's called a sugar mode. Cell can burn sugar. In times of emergency, like if we had to run out, the building's on fire or something like that, we would all shift into a sugar mode. We'd all be burning sugar like crazy, be out running around. But you can't store much sugar. And that's because it's only really meant to be there as an emergency mode. It's not a healthy way to go. It's a poor producer of energy over time. So what will happen is your body will begin to shift from burning fat efficiently to starting over to burning sugar and relying more on sugar. When it does this, lots of problems happen. Diabetes develops, all the degenerative diseases develop, and what do you think happens down here? You kind of get fat. So we've all, to one extent or another, battled with this a little bit. Even skinny guys like me, as I've gotten older, I've noticed that had I not been doing all this thing, it's a little bit easier for me to put on weight than it was when I was a younger guy. So we all notice this. So this whole thing about gaining weight as we get older, that's a significant issue to look at. It means something. It doesn't just mean, oh, geez, I don't like the way I look. It actually means something is off with your fat metabolism. Now, there are numbers of reasons for that, but one of the primary reasons for that is lack of growth hormone, or IGF-1. Because IGF-1 is one of the principal hormones in your body that stimulates fat metabolism. So that's number 3. And finally, with 4, it improves the function of all the other hormones. So we know that there's a lot of hormones. There's sex hormones, there's thyroid hormones, there's growth hormone, there's immune-related hormones. There's numbers of hormones out there. They all kind of work together, although each hormone has its separate role. They all have a mutual interdependence, and to a large extent, they're all very dependent on IGF-1. So, if you're taking, say, the sex hormones, men, that would be testosterone, ladies, that would be estrogens and progesterones. If you're taking that, and your IGF-1 levels are very low, you will find that it doesn't work nearly as well for you as it would have if you get your IGF-1 levels up to standards. So those are the 4 primary effects you can expect. Now, when you don't have IGF-1, you can expect all this to get worse. As your IGF-1 levels get better, you can expect all of that to get better. Here's a quote from the 8th edition of Williams' textbook of endocrinology. Endocrinology is the study of hormones, where he says, the number of differentiated cell functions, that means all the stuff that cells do, regulated by the somatomedins, that's growth hormone, okay, that's IGF-1 is what he's talking about, is large. And the rate of expansion of this number, meaning every year they're finding out it does more stuff, okay, suggests that those peptides, growth hormone, play some yet undefined role that is essential for basically everything that goes on in that cell. Now, it's an awfully powerful statement. In terms of statements about hormones in Williams' textbook, which is considered the textbook on hormones, I don't know that I've seen him be that strong on any hormone as he is on growth hormone. So how do you know if you're starting to get IGF-1 deficient? Well, clearly the easiest way is get a level done. And you can see if you're deficient. But there are some clinical signs. And you know, many of you will begin to have seen some of these signs. The principle is a shift from fat to glucose metabolism. You're gaining weight, particularly weight around the middle here. And your blood sugar's creeping up. Maybe your fasting blood sugar used to be 80 when you were 30, and now you're 50 and it's 97. You don't have diabetes, but it's gone up by 15%. You know, and then by the time you're 65, it's 102. Still not diabetes, but something's going on. And so that's one of the first signs you can see. As this happens, by the way, you'll see your cholesterol go up. So as you make that shift, cholesterols and triglycerides and all those blood fats tend to go up. Leptin, some of you might have heard about this hormone. Leptin is the hormone that makes you feel sated, so that after you eat a meal, your body makes a lot of leptin. Leptin goes up to your brain and says, oh, you're full, Frank. You shouldn't eat anymore. You don't need to eat anymore. But if your body doesn't make enough leptin, then you got a problem. You got to feel like you got to keep eating. Now, there's a lot of interesting information around leptin, but I did want to point out to you that if your leptin levels are going up, that means it's not working that well. You're getting what they call leptin resistance. And it's not working that well. Why wouldn't it be working that well? One of the reasons is it's a hormone and it needs IGF-1 to work. So increasing leptin levels. Increased truncal and visceral fat. So this is the kind of fat where it's all in here. You're not, you don't get the fat legs, you don't get the fat arms, you don't get the fat face. It's pretty much right in here. Fat chest, fat back, and right around the midsection, the beer belly kind of thing. So it's a special kind of fat. Fat gain is an indicator of IGF-1 deficiency. Of course, if there's anything at all wrong with your heart, if your heart is decompensating, and now how would you know that? Probably your doctor would tell you you had heart failure. So that would be a late sign, wouldn't it? Decreased lean body mass. You're not as strong as you used to be. You look in the mirror and say, I didn't look that way 10 years ago. Growth hormone stimulates muscle. That's why the athletes abuse it, because it stimulates strength. Okay? And degenerative joint disease. One of the things that every day we're up and we're around, we're doing, especially if you're exercising, you're damaging your joints. What's in your joints? Collagen and cartilage. What repairs collagen and cartilage? Principally, in the whole entire body, IGF-1 is the big one. So my knees aren't so good, my shoulders aren't so good, my back, the discs in my back aren't so good. Think growth hormone. So those are sort of the signs and symptoms you can kind of look for. But what would cause IGF-1 deficiency besides aging? There are a lot of lifestyle factors that can contribute to this. And before we get into immediately how to raise it with Sermorelin, I want you to understand that there are other things that you can do to boost your levels. And if you find that your IGF-1 level is really low, you might want to try some of these things to see how far you can get it up before you go right into Sermorelin. Why? Because as you will learn, Sermorelin is expensive. And so if you can, the less you have to use, the better for that reason alone. Oral estrogen replacement therapy. So oral estrogen doesn't make any difference if it's natural or synthetic. Synthetic is, been proven to cause cancer, so we never use that. Bioidentical is safe. It doesn't do anything like that. But I never give my hormones anymore orally, because it has been proven now in studies to show that oral hormone replacement therapy does cause IGF-1 deficiency. Why? Because as you'll see, IGF-1 is made in the liver. That's where it's made. And those hormones go into the intestine, go straight to the liver, and somehow they confound the liver's ability to make IGF-1. Excessive dietary carbohydrate, because of its effect on the liver. Mostly I'm talking about sugars here, but I'm also talking about the grains and breads and the chips and the cookies, all the stuff. That has been shown because of its effect on the liver to bump down your IGF-1 levels. Insufficient calories and or protein, but particularly protein calories. So if your diet is shifted, like most American diets have shifted, where you're eating a little bit less protein and more carbohydrate, your IGF-1 levels will tend to go down as a result of that. Now, fasting is a great way actually to raise your IGF-1 levels, but only short-term fasting. Long-term fasting lowers it. Your body thinks you're starving, in essence, so it lowers your IGF-1 levels. So short-term fasts, I highly recommend them. We'll talk a little bit about that. But longer-term fasts, not a particularly good idea unless you're doing it for some kind of a clinical therapy. Hypothyroidism. Almost everybody over the age of 50 is low in thyroid production. Why is this? It's a whole topic for another lecture, so I'm not going to get into it. But one thing you cannot rely on is blood thyroid tests. They're essentially useless for diagnosing 95% of cases of low thyroid function. They're not sensitive enough. We use metabolic testing here to diagnose it, and we find overwhelmingly that the metabolic testing will pick it up, whereas the serum blood testing of the thyroid hormones and TSH totally misses it most of the time. But low thyroidism, low thyroid function will cause a decrease in your IGF-1 levels. So that's something you want to pay attention to. Sex hormone deficiency. So in men, testosterone. By the way, ladies also need testosterone, but it's the primary one for men. And in women, estrogens and the progesterones. Suboptimal hepatic function. Again, this means your liver isn't working quite as well as it should, probably because your liver's toxic. Why would it be toxic? Well, too much coffee will do it. Too much alcohol will do it. Not enough of certain nutrients will do it. Too much, all those too muches tend to bother your liver. So if your liver isn't working right, as growth hormone is made in the liver, so that'd be an issue. And then, of course, just age. The older you get, the lower your IGF-1s get. Frequent eating lowers your IGF-1 levels, so it's good to fast. And I recommend people get in the habit of eating 1 meal a day and not eating the 3 or 4 meals that everybody says. And all that nonsense about grazing and eating something every 1 or 2 hours is great if you want to be fat and unhealthy. But if you want to be healthy, you want to go with how your body was made, and that was to eat and then go for a longer period of time where it doesn't eat. And then it goes into a catabolic state and works that out, and then you eat again and replenish your stores. Emotional deprivation, that's been shown to, there have been some studies on that showing to lower IGF-1 levels. Any kind of stress will. So we see IGF-1 levels plummet when there's a lot of stress in somebody's life. Sleep deprivation is huge. You make your growth hormone while you're sleeping, roughly around 2 a.m. So if you're not sleeping at 2 a.m., you may not be making your IGF-1 very well. And exercise deprivation. Exercise is one of the things that your body really needs. It needs that when you get older. And if you're not getting that, you're depriving your body of something that's pretty critical for it, and certainly very critical to help you make IGF-1. So let's learn a little bit more about IGF-1. As I said, IGF-1 is made in the liver. So I'll have a chart that's going to come up here in a little bit that will show this to you. But the way the system works like this is, in your brain, you have a gland called the pituitary gland. It's sort of the master controller of all the hormones. It sends messages out to all the glands that produce hormones to go make some. So it sort of registers what's going on and orchestrates the whole hormonal balance in your body, the pituitary gland up in the brain. It also directly makes a hormone called growth hormone. Okay? Growth hormone, therefore, is made in the pituitary, straight in central control. That's because it's so darn important. It's not going to wait for something else to, like, maybe go bad. This is made straight from the central control. Growth hormone, in and of itself, however, doesn't do a lot. And in fact, your body makes growth hormone in 2 spurts. It's very interesting. One spurt is at 2 a.m. and one spurt is at 2 p.m. In between those 2 little spurts, which might last 2 minutes, your growth hormone levels would be extremely low in the blood. That's why it's essentially useless to measure growth hormone levels. You can't really do it unless you're in some kind of research setting. But when your pituitary makes growth hormone, it goes down and it immediately contacts the liver, and the liver cranks out IGF-1 in response to the growth hormone. The IGF-1 stays in your bloodstream very steady, and it actually is the hormone that does everything. So even though there is a hormone called growth hormone, the real action is IGF-1. That's why we measure that. That's why we don't measure growth hormone. It's all about IGF-1. So IGF-1 comes from the liver, secondary to the action of growth hormone. You notice I say most IGF-1 comes from the liver. All cells can make IGF-1. So every cell can make IGF-1, but predominantly all your cells are getting it from what the liver makes. IGF-1 production in individual tissues is tropin dependent. So like I said, all cells can make it, but it's dependent. Tropins are the hormones that come from the pituitary. Remember I said the pituitary is orchestrating all this stuff? So it'll send a tropin hormone out to the adrenal gland to make adrenal hormones. So anyhow, when the adrenal gland gets that tropin, it can actually make growth hormones. So again, it's important to realize that even though growth hormone is this one little hormone and we talk about it, it influences every single thing going in your body, including all of the other hormones. The IGF-1 levels of a 70-year-old are about half of what it used to be when you were 20 to 30. People say typically you lose 1 to 2% of your IGF-1 for every year of life after the age of 30. That's typically what you see. So you are going to lose your growth hormone. What we don't know is how fast and how bad it's going to be. But we do know that that is definitely something that happens. It's one of the things that causes us to fall apart as we get older. But you will find some exceptions. I mean, we do find 70-year-olders that have the growth hormone level of 270. I mean, IGF-1 level of 270. So yeah, until you actually do the measurement, you can't draw any big conclusions. And I think we already talked about that. Oral estrogen inhibits the growth hormone stimulation of IGF-1 in the liver. So I hope you just remember, if you're taking estrogen replacement therapy, and I think that's a great idea for all women to do, but if you are, make sure you're not taking it in the form of pills. You're taking it in the form of creams. That way it bypasses the liver and doesn't have this effect. This again comes from a chapter in Williams' textbook of endocrinology called Variations in Nutritional Status are as important in growth hormone in modulating serum IGF-1 levels. So this is just a quote from the book. And I put this in there so that you can understand that even though tonight's lecture is going to be about raising your IGF-1 levels by taking Sermorelin, I want you to understand that you can raise them by fasting. But not by fasting over 48 hours. And I guess we already covered a lot of this, the calories and the protein and the carbohydrate. And also by exercising. So first thing I want to do before we get into actually how to raise it with Sermorelin is to make you understand that increase the protein in your diet. A good little number is to 1.35 grams per kilogram per day. That's probably more protein than most people are used to. Shift your diet more towards protein. By the way, it doesn't have to be animal protein. You get a lot of protein from vegetables. I do not like grains. Grains are awfully high in glycemic. They're high in carbs. They're high in sugar. I do not like them as a source of proteins. But beans are really good. Any vegetables have good quality proteins in them. Soy, of course, is a bean. That has a good protein value to it as well. And, of course, any of the animal proteins like eggs and meats and such. And watch those carbs. Amino acids are a pretty good thing to take on a regular basis. One of the best amino acids to raise your growth hormone levels is an amino acid called L-glutamine. Another really good one is one called L-lysine, and another good one is L-arginine. And a lot of the bodybuilders, you can go into the health food store and you can buy these powders that will contain specifically those amino acids to help raise their IGF-1 levels, so they'll get more muscle on their bones. I mentioned this earlier. Skip meals. Get out of this dictum. I don't know who came up with this about, yeah, you're supposed to eat all the time. That actually isn't true. It's good to skip meals. So try and skip meals. And as I say, I recommend if people can, where are we? If people can, try to eat just one meal a day. That's a good way to go. And avoid oral estrogen. Okay, another thing you can do is avoid eating before bed. If you eat before bed, especially certain proteins, you will suppress your body. Remember, it's about 2 a.m., your body's going to make this little spurt of growth hormone. You'll suppress that growth, that spurt of growth hormone, if you eat before you go to bed, except if you eat carbohydrates. Now, that's kind of, you might think, well, that doesn't make sense. You just told me not to eat carbohydrates. But if you eat carbohydrates just before you go to bed, and I'm talking about like half an apple, quarter of an orange, something like that, a little sugar load there. Not a whole lot, but just a little sugar load before you go to bed. It will stimulate the production of insulin, and there's this reaction that occurs where your body actually would make more growth hormone by doing that. If you study this, you'll see that certain bodybuilders, that's what they'll do before they go to bed at night. They'll eat some fruit and then take these special amino acid pills that I just talked about, and they'll try and get a little bang for that buck there. There are certain herbs and various products you can buy over the internet and in health food stores that are purported to raise your IGF-1 levels. People are always asking me, do these things in fact work? I will tell you, mostly they don't. Mostly it's just some company trying to make a buck. But if somebody asks me, say, well, I'm sure this works, I fine. Say, good. Check your IGF-1 level. Go take it and check your IGF-1 level again. If it's working, you'll see the numbers go up. There's a lot of scam products, a lot of them out there on the internet and in health food stores, and people insist they raise growth hormone levels, but when you actually break it down, they have absolutely no evidence at all to show that they raise IGF-1 levels. So mostly, I think that stuff probably, whoops, sorry. Clicked on the wrong thing. Okay. Optimize liver function, get adequate sleep. Those all make sense. Okay, other things you can do is treat all the other hormone deficiencies. So take a look at your thyroid, get your metabolism checked. Do not rely on thyroid hormones. In the old days, before I had metabolic studies to detect thyroid abnormalities, I would give thyroid hormone just based upon clinical presentation, like the old docs used to do it 50 and 100 years ago. Examine my patient, talk to my patient. You can sort of figure out if the thyroid hormone depleted by that. Give them a little thyroid hormone. DHEA is an adrenal hormone that can be very helpful with IGF-1. Testosterone is the male sex hormone. Estrogen, progesterone, the female hormone. Regular, safe exercise. That just means don't overdo it. Don't be a weekend warrior that decides, I'm going to going from being this couch potato to being an Olympic athlete in the next 6 weeks. Just take it slowly and gradually increase. Think of exercise as being something that's lifelong. We're in no rush. We've got plenty of time to get in good shape. Okay, now we get into the reason you're here. Okay, Sermorelin. What is it? It's a biologically active analog of growth hormone releasing hormone, GHRH, growth hormone releasing hormone. So what it isn't is it isn't growth hormone. What a biologically active analog means is they make it in a laboratory. That's where they're making it. They're making it so that it looks identical to this molecule, GHRH, growth hormone releasing hormone. So remember I told you your pituitary makes growth hormone? Well, it doesn't do this on its own. Actually, the pituitary doesn't do anything on its own. It receives orders from the top of your brain called the hypothalamus, which is going to register. What the hypothalamus does is it registers what's going on in the whole body. It's like a thermostat. It's checking everything out. And it says, oh, look, he's hot, so we need to cool him down. Oh, he's too cold, we need to heat him up. oh, look, he needs more catabolic activity. Oh, no, he needs less catabolic activity. So the brain, the hypothalamus part of your brain is registering everything that's going on. And then it makes a decision and it thinks to itself, you know what? He needs some growth hormone right now. Let's get him some IGF-1. So it sends a message down to the pituitary, and that's when the pituitary starts rolling. The message the hypothalamus sends is growth hormone releasing hormone. So when the top part of your brain understands that your body needs some IGF-1, say it needs some collagen, the brain figures that out, it's going to release this hormone, Sermorelin. It's going to release that hormone. That hormone then is going to go down into your pituitary and stimulate your pituitary to make growth hormone. So when you take growth hormone, you're taking this. You're bypassing the whole pituitary. You're just taking this, injecting this into your body. Growth hormone then, once it's injected into your body, goes to your liver, makes IGF-1. The IGF-1 goes back to the brain and cuts down the production of growth hormone. So think of this. When you take growth hormone injections, and I'm going to go over this again, but when you take growth hormone injections, what are you actually telling the pituitary to do? To stop working. You're teaching the pituitary, you know what? You're not making me enough growth hormone, so I'm going to take this growth hormone, and that's going to teach you to make even less. You might think, well, that doesn't sound like a very good idea. And it's not really. It's not a good idea, but it's the best we had until Sermorelin came out. It was the way we did business. So we would give growth hormone and raise the IGF-1 levels. We get all the beautiful benefits from IGF-1 levels, but a nasty little thing would happen. And that is, number one, we lost the entire feedback mechanism because this whole thing was circumvented. The thing between the hypothalamus, growth hormone releasing hormone, remember that Sermorelin, and the pituitary, that was all circumvented and just passed up by going straight to this. So we actually worsened things. And you could get side effects from growth hormone if you weren't careful with the dose. The cool thing about giving Sermorelin, just going right in here, is you maintain the entire axis. Nothing gets fouled up. Not only that, you not only don't negatively feed back to the pituitary, you actually improve the pituitary axis because you're stimulating it. I'll discuss this again in a sec to try to make this clear to yourself. So when you take Sermorelin, you see, you don't have to worry about the dose. It's self-regulating. We used to have to really pay pretty careful attention to lots of blood tests and stuff like that when taking growth hormone. And we would also notice, by the way, that if this is the amount of growth hormone you needed, after about 1.5 years of growth hormone, you need a little bit more. After about more of that, you need a little bit more. Why? Because what's happening is the negative feedback is causing your body to make less and less. And it's worsening the whole reason you start taking it in the first place. So you can imagine knowing this, and I've known this as all the anti-aging researchers have known this for many years. You can realize how disappointing it was to have to give myself and to give my patients growth hormone, knowing that Sermorelin had been produced and patented in 1992. So we'll talk a little bit about why it just came out last January. But that's clearly the way to go. So does that make sense to everybody a little bit? Okay, by coming in here, you're stimulating the pituitary to do this whole axis. The whole feedback loop is complete. But by coming in here with growth hormone, you bypass this, and this becomes quiescent and actually gets a little bit worse over time. This is what happens when you take Sermorelin. Again, when you take growth hormone, because you're bypassing and actually creating a suppressive effect, you typically over time need to bump up the dose. And any of you guys have been on growth hormone have probably seen this. One dose is just fine for a while, and your IGF-1 levels are maintaining real nice. And then next year you come in, we check your IGF-1 levels, and they're kind of down. You don't really know why, but you got to bump up the dose again. You keep on doing that. And of course, the more you take, the more expensive it gets. And you know, so we've seen that. But look what happens with Sermorelin. If you look at the IGF-1s, remember now we want to go up to around the low 200s. That's what we're looking at. So let's look at this patient here. He's a 50-year-old patient. His IGF-1 level is 134. And we give him Sermorelin. Sure enough, it bounces up to 195. But the interesting thing is that when you, I don't have the graphs here, but when you look at this over time, you'll see that the next month he's up to 205. The month after that, he's up to 230. The month after, of course, he'll level out at some point, but it steadily goes up. Why? Because we're not suppressing the pituitary like we were with growth hormone. We're actually making it work better. So it's starting to crank out stuff on its own now. This is a much better therapy than giving growth hormone. Here's a 52-year-old patient, 126, went all the way up to 220. That's pretty amazing with Sermorelin. And each month it'll keep going up. So when you take this, what you want to do is for the first 3, 4, 5 months, you just check your IGF-1 level every month, because what you're going to see is it's going to go up, it's going to go up, it's going to go up, and then it's going to tail off, and then that's where you're going to end up. It doesn't get any better than that. And that's the number we're going to treat for. So if at the, like if you're this guy, 56-year-old person, there's probably a woman. Women don't respond as well to it. You tend to need to give them higher doses. 113, a little bit later, it's only 126, didn't get much of a rise. We wouldn't want to probably immediately increase the Sermorelin dose until we followed that person over a 2 or 3 month period, because you never know, this might be 175 the next month. Okay, so by now, you might be starting to be able to answer some of these questions that I'm throwing up here. Why Sermorelin is better than human growth hormone? That's HGH. In terms of injections. Now, Sermorelin is an injection. These things are very similar to the hormone insulin. That's the way I explain it to people. Everybody knows that diabetics need insulin. At least a lot of them need insulin. Everybody also knows they have to take it in the form of a shot. Nobody has figured out a way to have an insulin pill. Why? Because it's such a complex molecule, it won't withstand the GI tract, and it just won't work. So you have to use it as an injection. These molecules are also complex, and they get broken down in the GI tract. So as of yet, nobody has figured out a way to get either Sermorelin in or even growth hormone in without taking it as an injection. So it is an injection that you take. So why is Sermorelin better than taking growth hormone? Because it has none of the potential side effects of growth hormone. We see 0 side effects with Sermorelin at any dose. It's self-regulating. You give too much Sermorelin to somebody, all you're doing is wasting their money. You're not going to hurt them. This is not true with growth hormone. Too much growth hormone, you can give carpal tunnel syndrome, you can give arthritis, you can cause diabetes with too much growth hormone. That's only with too much. I want to scare you. If you're already on growth hormone, don't be scared. That's if you take too much. But with Sermorelin, it's very safe. It's a built-in safety factor with it. Secondly, by stimulating the pituitary, Sermorelin preserves the growth hormone regulating axis. So we kind of covered that. It's all that axis, you tend to lose that as you get older. Growth hormone makes you lose it faster. Sermorelin actually improves it, makes it more youthful. This is good. Because remember, it's this growth hormone, the pituitary growth hormone regulating axis that regulates all the other hormones in the body. So you want it to be better. Thirdly, by stimulating the pituitary, Sermorelin also blocks the cascade of pituitary failure that occurs during aging. Like I said, as you get older, everything goes to pot, right? One of the things that goes to pot is your pituitary. So it's going down. But by taking Sermorelin, you're going to slow that rate of pituitary failure. With growth hormone, you accelerate the rate. And lastly, Sermorelin, unlike growth hormone, has a direct effect on the brain to promote slow-wave sleep. So growth hormone itself won't promote sleep, but Sermorelin, by inducing the pituitary to make growth hormone, promotes sleep. One of the things that most people have problems with as they get older is getting some good quality restorative sleep. Sermorelin does great in this way. We've used it now for 4 or 5 months. I've been on it for about that same period of time. And I've noticed my sleep improving, and most of my patients report that their sleep has improved. We didn't see this with growth hormone. So those are 4 nice reasons why I think Sermorelin is the best way to go. Now, taking Sermorelin, okay, it's the same. We use the same needle that diabetics use. It's a little tiny needle. Don't let the shot itself, shouldn't scare anybody. Essentially, there's only one downside to either growth hormone or Sermorelin, and that's its cost. It's expensive. Shy of that, in terms of Sermorelin at least, that is one negative thing I could say about it. There's a list this long about positive things. But the one negative thing is that it's kind of expensive. For a man to take it full time, you're looking at $225 in that order. Now, that's about, because, you know, some men are going to need more, some men are going to need less. And for women, women typically need more to get the same raise in IGF-1 levels. So a lady will have to spend in the order of $250 a month. Not a lot of people have, you know, that amount of money. So if that's a couple, you're looking at roughly $500 a month on this one thing. Nothing else, just this one thing. Now, it's pretty powerful, but that's a lot of money. Now, not a lot of people have that kind of money to spend on things. So what I want to point out to you is several studies have shown up that have not been done on Sermorelin yet, but that were done on growth hormone. Here's what the studies show. The usual parameter they used was the bone density test. Bone is a bone density test is an X-ray kind of test. You can look to see how much collagen, how strong the bone is. You guys have probably all heard of these. So what we know is that over time, you know, when you're in your 60s or 70s, you're going to lose bone density every year. We know that. So what they did was they've done a couple studies where they basically took 3 groups of people. They're all more or less the same size, same sex. They're more or less matched. One group of people didn't get anything. Another group of people got growth hormone all the time, every day of the month. And a third group would get growth hormone, but not all the time. Sometimes they would do it every other day. Sometimes they would do it 1 month on, 1 month off. Sometimes they would do it 1 week out of the month, depending on the study protocol. Here's what they observed. And then they would do a bone density test before and then after 1 or 2 years of therapy. What they found was, in every study so far, that the people who didn't take any growth hormone, their bone densities went down as predicted. Good bet on that. The people that took the growth hormone full-time, their bone densities not only didn't go down, they actually went up. It became more like the bone density of somebody 20 years younger. And the people that were on the lower dose, or like every other month, or that kind of version of the growth hormone, their bone densities actually went up. So the lowest amount of time that I've seen on that is when people were doing it 25% of the time. So think of it this way. If you know, somebody can't spend $250 a month, they can take 20% of that would be $50 a month. So just take it 1 week out of every 5 weeks, you'll still get benefit. You're still helping a little bit. So it's just something to think about.